Hey everybody, welcome to the channel, True Crime Stories. If you're new to the channel, please hit that like button and subscribe so you can hear more. Thanks for stopping by. So this is from Missing in West Virginia. 18-year-old Jay Farley and 25-year-old Mazie Mae Sigmon-Palmer were casually dating for a few weeks when they disappeared on July 14th, 1979 in Charleston, West Virginia. The two were last seen alive together at a nightclub. 5 years later, in 1984, Jay's remains would be found. Jay had been bound and shot to death. Mazie has never been seen again. Why was Jay murdered and what happened to Mazie? From Mid-Atlantic Unsolved. In 1979, Jay Farley was an 18-year-old fresh out of high school kid who had just applied to several local jobs. He had been considering joining the military. He lived in Dunbar, West Virginia with his family. He met Mazie Mae Sigmon-Palmer. She was 25 years old, recently divorced, and living with her parents in Sissonville, West Virginia. She had worked various jobs in nursing homes, as well as doing some secretarial work. She had no criminal record, and the police don't believe she had anything to do with Jay's murder. However, it was said that Mazie Mae did have an association with a motorcycle gang who had had some trouble with drug deals. Had been, a few of these people that she was associated with had been arrested and had some drug charges. Now, for a few weeks, Jay and Mazie Mae began seeing each other. It was very casual. They met at a downtown bar called Roaring Twenties in downtown Charleston, West Virginia. At about 11 p.m., they left the Roaring Twenties and headed to another night spot. Now, the bar was called the King's Inn. They all went into this King's Inn and they got a table. Now, Mazie Mae excused herself to go up to the second floor to speak to someone that she knew. She didn't come back down, and Jay decided to go up looking for her. Now, this was the last time that either one of them would ever be seen alive. When they didn't come home the next day, Jay's family were kind of beginning to panic. It was very unusual for him to stay out all night and not let his family know where he was. He was very close to his family. Now, Mazie's Mae family, it was said, was a little bit less concerned. She was a little older, and she was known to go out at night, and sometimes she didn't come back home. So they weren't initially very concerned. Now, eventually, it doesn't say how long they waited, but eventually both of them were reported missing by their families. In 1984, Jay's skeletal remains would be found in Fayette County, West Virginia, about 30 miles from Charleston, where he was last seen. He had his hands taped behind his back, and a single bullet was found underneath his skeleton. The tattered remains of his clothing were still there, and it was all likelihood, it was believed, that Jay had been murdered that same night. Now, no trace of Mazie was found with Jay's remains. At the time that she went missing, Mazie was described as 5 foot 6 inches tall and about 115 pounds. She had brown hair and brown eyes. She was believed to last be wearing a pink and orange blouse, blue jeans, and sandals. It was thought that she was wearing a gold ring with a small diamond. Mazie was seen that night. She was seen carrying a blue purse with silver trim and a shoulder strap. On the evening of July 14th, 1979, these two people met up at a nightclub. They hung out for a bit at this one nightclub and talked with some friends of theirs. But at some point during the night, they would vanish, and no trace of either of them no trace of them would be found for at least 5 years, in 1984. John Jr. preferred to go by Jay, and he had just graduated high school. His father and stepmother, Goldie, had wanted to move closer to Charleston, so Jay stayed behind and lived with his grandmother. He wanted to finish out his high school years in the same school he had been going to, so Jay and his grandmother, Desi, were very close. And they described Jay as a well-behaved child growing up. At just 18 and fresh out of school, Jay was still undecided what he wanted to do with his life. He thought about going into the workforce, but he was also talking quite a bit about joining the Navy. He had also been trying to plan a few trips to see some of the country with some of his high school friends before everyone scattered out into their own lives. He was enjoying his first summer as an adult at 18, and his father described him as being very popular with girls. He had a lot of girlfriends. He hit it off with girls, but he meets this older woman. Now, she was 25, he was 18. She was recently divorced, as they described. Now, Mazie was older than Jay, but neither one appeared to be trying to make it into a serious relationship. To both of them, they were just seeing it as a fun fling. Jay probably seeing dating this older woman, being taken to nightclubs and stuff that he had never done before. And she's freshly divorced. She's wanting to enjoy life. She's wanting to get out and hang out with people. And this younger man comes along, probably flatters her. And so the two of them were just seeing this as just a fun fling. But still, the two enjoyed each other's company, and they went out on a few dates. Now, Jay hadn't even started driving yet. I mean, he's 18, but by his family's description, he had not started driving yet. So I don't know if he didn't have a driver's license or if he just hadn't gotten around to making enough money to try to get a car. But she didn't have a car either. So when they would go places together, they would have someone drive them. They would meet up with some of her friends, or they'd have someone drop them off. Now, it goes on here to say Mazie was a complicated woman, and how well they knew each other was still a little bit unclear. Mazie was described by her friends as naive for her age. She was also prone to telling lies and would occasionally even give people a false name. She would sometimes tell people that she was younger than she was, and sometimes she would tell people that she was older than she was. She was actually born in 1954, but a lot of times she would tell people that she wasn't born until 1960. Sometimes she would use her younger sister's birth certificate and tell people that she was her sister. So it's possible that she may have been lying to Jay about her age. She may have been telling him that she was younger. He might have seen her as not as an older woman, but someone closer to his own age. But her friends didn't describe her as being a manipulative person. They didn't say that she did this to gain anything, but maybe she was just a little bit embarrassed. And some people say that she owed some back medical bills. So a lot of times she would give a fake name, her sister's name and her sister's birth date, in order for them to not be able to trace her to pay these bills. Now, she had lived in numerous places across the country. She had years of work experience in clerical jobs and nursing homes. But her friends described her as kind and said that she saw the best in everyone even when she shouldn't. Halfway through the summer of July 14th, 1979, the two of them made plans to go out. Mazie put on her jeans and her pink blouse, and Jay was wearing a blue and pink plaid shirt. They were going to kick off the night at a nightclub called the Roaring Twenties. Now, Jay had told his family that he wouldn't be out too late. He told his grandmother that he was only going to be gone for a few hours. Because Jay didn't have his license yet, he met up with a friend named Kevin Withrow, and Kevin picked him up and gave him a ride to the club. It said that Mazie was staying with some family, and it wasn't clear whether this was an aunt and uncle or one of her mother's cousins. But either way, her uncle Ira drove her to the nightclub that night. She borrowed $5 from him. From this point on, the timeline gets a little bit fuzzy. The official police report and the news contradict each other. According to the police report, Mazie and Jay only stayed at the Roaring Twenties Club for about an hour, and then they left. The pair were seen walking across the street, and they talked to Jay's friend, who was identified as Jimmy Ward. Now, Jimmy was sitting in the street in his car, and he talked to them as they went on down the street, walking. And he said that they walked into the parking lot of a nearby hotel called the Holly Hotel. Now, the news gave this time as 1 o'clock in the morning, but now the friend says it was more closer to 11 p.m. He says it was around 11 p.m. when he saw them. Now, at some point during the night, the police report says they ran into Kevin Withrow again, and Jay borrowed $2 from him. Either way, all accounts agree that Mazie and Jay were spotted walking down the street behind the Holly Hotel together. Once the two started trying to hitch a ride, the rest of the night became blurry. A man who gave them a ride came forward soon afterwards. This man's name was Bill Cottrell, and he said he picked them up and gave them a ride about 2 miles away to a nightclub called the King's Inn. Now, here's something that's kind of odd to me about this story. Now, here's one of the red flags. This man says I gave them a ride to this King's Inn nightclub, but neither one of them seemed to have any money at this point. He had borrowed $2 off of one of his friends. They had already been to this other club, but she only had $5 to begin with that people knew about. But I'm just wondering, did they go to this King's Inn club because they were hoping to run into someone they knew who maybe would give them a ride home? Or did they go there because they planned on spending more time out? Sounds to me almost like they were looking for a ride, and she thought maybe there were people in there that she would know. But either way, this Bill Cottrell came forward and said he gave them a ride. He said when they pulled up to the parking lot that Mazie recognized a car and said out loud, "Oh, he's in there." Now, when they started walking into the bar, Mazie saw a friend named Karen Carpenter. Now, she was standing outside the front entrance, and the two of them stood and talked for a little while. So then the three of them, Mazie, Bill, and Jay, all walked inside the bar together, and they got a table. Mazie excused herself and went upstairs, and Bill said he believed that she had went up there because she knew someone she knew was up there, and she went upstairs to talk to this person. He says that he and Jay shared a drink, but Jay started worrying about Mazie when she didn't come back to the table. Now, Bill tells the police that when Jay said, "I'm going to go up and look for her," Bill said, "Well, I'm leaving," and he left. Now, this is his story. Now, I don't know about what happened to this man later that night. I don't know if he had an alibi, if people saw him leaving the bar that night alone. But he says when Jay got up from the table to go upstairs to look for Mazie, he said, "Okay, I'm going to go." Bill left the King's Inn, and after this was the last time anyone reported seeing Jay and Mazie. The next day, like I said earlier, the family of Mazie were not all that worried, and they thought she just spent the night with somebody. But as the day went on and as the evening came, the next evening, after nearly 2 days of not hearing anything from her, they started to worry. And Jay's family became concerned right away. He was barely an adult, and they thought, he's out with this older woman. Possibly he spent the night with her, but they believe he would have called. They believe he would have let them know. They didn't call the police that whole first day because they didn't want to seem like they were overly concerned, and after all, he was a young man. But when they hadn't heard from him by the second day, they also contacted the police. And some of Mazie's family said they didn't even know who she was going out with that night. They didn't know anything about this Jay guy. I mean, they didn't know who she was seeing, and they didn't know, what her plans had been for that night. Now, when they contacted the Dunbar police to report her missing, they told them her first name, and they said that she could either be going by Sigmon or Shamblin. But now her family that lived closer to Charleston reported her missing to the Charleston police. Now, because they had, she had been reported missing at 2 different police departments, they weren't linking the person as the same person. Dunbar and Charleston police departments were not, this is one woman. They each took a police report for a missing woman, but it took several days before they realized we're all looking for the same person. They didn't know it at the time, but both families were saying the same things about their children. Mazie's mom, Thelma, understood that Mazie was an adult with her own life, but she says they'd always had a close relationship, and they talked on the phone several times a week. She said that her daughter would always tell her if she was staying somewhere new, if she was traveling, or she would talk about her life, and she would always tell her mom what was going on with her. Now, Jay's parents were also telling the police that from day one their son would not run away. They said he had taken no extra clothes with him. He had been, he said they told police if he had been planning on going somewhere, he would definitely have let his grandmother know. He wouldn't have worried her. Now, Jay, let's keep in mind here, he's 18. So people see this as a young man with the ability to make his own choices. But he still lived at home with his grandmother, and he still shared a bedroom with his younger brother. And his younger brother, Jamie, said that he kept most of his savings in the bedroom and that none of the money was touched. The money was still there. So Jay had, he had money at home, but he didn't take any with him that night, a few dollars, because he had plans for this money. Now, the Dunbar police were certain that Jay had just up and run away. They would not be convinced otherwise. In fact, they seemed reluctant to even investigate Jay's disappearance. Jay's family had reported him missing on the 16th, and Dunbar Police Department waited several days to actually even put his name down as officially, to even took a, to say, here's this guy that has been reported missing. Some say it was up to 7 days, others say it was 11 days before they put out an APB, and that his dad was calling every single day, calling different police departments. And none of them were saying, we have taken a report about this guy. John, his dad, wanted to go to the local paper. He said police were not doing anything. Police were not helping. So he took it upon himself and he took out several ads in several local newspapers. Now this brings us to the first theory about the disappearance. There were whispers back in Dunbar that Jay was actually killed by the Dunbar Police Department because he witnessed them committing police brutality, and that he was going to be a witness against them in court. Now, looking closer into this, there was a kernel of truth to the fact that Jay had been present at a controversial police arrest. Apparently, there was someone who worked at a Dairy Queen, which was a popular hangout for the local teenagers, and police were called there, and they were arresting someone on a suspicion of drug charges. The suspect began to fight back, and a struggle ensued. And the police began to beat this guy and gave him lacerations on his head. Now, Jay's family said that they had only ever heard rumors from other people in town, and they had never heard Jay speak about this. So if he had been there that night and he was a witness to this, they said that no one had ever come to their house. He had never told anyone. The police has reached out to me, or anyone, from this person's family has reached out to me to be a witness. So they didn't know anything about this story. But stranger things. Some people are saying that this rumor got started because the Dunbar Police Department did such a poor job of handling Jay's disappearance, and they didn't seem to care one way or the other that this 18-year-old boy had gone missing. The Dunbar police have since spoken out about this, and they said they did follow up on leads, but because the case was out of their jurisdiction, and it was the jurisdiction of the Charleston Police Department, it was not their place to go out and search for Jay. But they did say that they did cooperate anytime Charleston Police Department or the Kanawha County Sheriff's Department reached out to them. And they claimed that they had no lawsuits against them from anyone that had filed for police brutality, and they didn't know anything about Jay prior to this happening. Now, it would be September of that year before the investigation really took any kind of seriousness. Charleston Police Department took over the case, but they thought that Jay was likely a runaway, so they kind of set it aside. They also kind of were not really doing a whole lot to search for Mazie, and they didn't connect the two of them at the time. People were not saying, well, these two were last seen together, and then they both disappeared that night. So the police hadn't even put this together yet. The case sat largely undisturbed until Deputy John Seymour of the Kanawha County Sheriff's Office took over the case, and he began to connect the dots. He began to see that both police departments had taken reports on these missing persons around the same time, and then he started to connect the dots that the two of them knew each other and that the two of them had actually been together. So this is when he starts to take this case a little bit more serious. And both families have spoken highly of his work, that he, did what he could to try to help. Now he started putting together as much information as he could, and he began with Jay. The Dunbar Police Department told Seymour that they thought Jay had just ran off. They thought he was with this older woman, and that his family was just upset that they were still seeing him as this kid, and he was actually 18, and they thought, okay, he's just met this older woman and took off. But when he starts putting the pieces together, the Dunbar Police Department had not even really kept any records. And they hadn't kept any real records of the family coming in and reporting Jay missing. So he has to start from scratch, pretty much. He called everyone in Sissonville area with the last name Shamlin and Sigmon. And he eventually got a hold of Mazie's brother, and he was able to match her name up with the missing person report out of Charleston, West Virginia. A few days later, he entered them both into the National Crime Information Database. And by the time the two cases were connected, it would be January of 1980. So about 6 months after they went missing, it was finally taken serious as two connected missing persons. Now, Seymour went to the Charleston Daily Mail, and he told them to run a story and gave them the profiles of Mazie and Jay. Now, the police knew that the cases were now connected, but the newspaper ran the stories as two separate missing persons. And neither family was being told. Jay's family was not being told about the disappearance of Mazie, and Mazie's family was not being told about the disappearance of Jay. And it was like nobody wanted to admit that these two had been together and had gone missing. And it was it was almost like the police were keeping this investigation kind of under wraps. Like they're doing their work now, but they're not wanting the public to know that they had actually two missing persons together. Now, Bill Cottrell, who was probably the last person known to have seen these two, and publicly spoke out and said, yes, I was with them, gave them a ride, spent some time with them. They were in my car. His story wasn't even being told to the public. Desi, Jay's grandmother, wrote a letter and put it out to the public. She wrote about Jay's disappearance and asked the public for answers. She said she was not accusing anyone of anything, and she never wanted to cause trouble for anybody, but she just wanted to know, where is her grandson? She says she's done everything she could. She's called numerous police departments. She called the mayor of Dunbar. She said, I kept waiting for my doorbell to ring or my telephone to ring, knowing that someone will call me up with some information, but nobody was. No police department was returning her calls. Nobody was doing anything to help her. So she writes this letter and she has it put out in the paper. The family was finally starting to get a little bit of information from a few stories coming out that the last time anyone reported seeing them was as they were walking to this Holly Hotel parking lot. And they didn't even know who the girl was. So I'm thinking that one of these two friends that had seen them that night told his family, well, I saw him with a woman or a girl. And the two of them walked off down the street toward the Holly Hotel parking lot. They didn't know who Mazie was. And they didn't know about Bill Cottrell and the story about them going to this other bar. Now, Mazie's family spoke with the media a little bit as well. Her father, Vernon, said he believed and hoped that she was still alive, But he didn't understand why she would just up and run away and not speak to him or her mother. Now, her mother didn't believe this. Her mother said she's dead. She said there's no way she would have run away without contacting me. If she had the ability to get word to me, call me up herself or send some word through someone else, she would have. She never believed that her daughter ran off. Now, Jay's family, it's said here, was left largely in the dark. They were left to their own devices to find and start their own investigation. They hired a private investigator, but they had no luck. They had to make their own phone calls and follow up on leads on their own. John said that they never really got the time to sit down and talk about Jay, and they spent most of the time out walking the streets looking for their son day and night. But now once this Seymour got the case, he officially opened an investigation, and things did start to move a little bit more. They began to check jails and hospitals, and they even tracked down Mazie's ex-husband, Kenneth Palmer, and they found that he was remarried and living in Arizona, but they did start to kind of watch him. They started keeping tabs on him. Before I move on into the next part of this story, I would just like to remind everybody, if you haven't already, to please like the video and subscribe to the channel. Later that spring, another police department reached out to Seymour. A public safety officer met with Seymour to tell him that he was trying to find Mazie as well, but not because she was missing. Apparently, she was a witness to a breaking and entering case, and this officer said that he had been trying to find her. Now, this doesn't make any sense. This is two different rumors that both of these people separately were witnesses to two different crimes, and that it was believed that they might have gone missing because, first of all, Jay might have gone missing because he was supposedly a witness to an attack that took place, police brutality. Now they're saying Mazie might have gone missing because she was a witness to a breaking and entering case, or that this man had been asked to go speak to her because she was a witness to this breaking and entering case. Now, the next lead would not come until February of 1981. Jay's father got a phone call from an unknown number and asked them to meet him at 2 o'clock at the bus station. He says, this person on the phone tells his father, I have proof that Jay is dead, and if you want to know who killed him, meet me there. John goes to this bus station, but nobody ever shows up. He sits there and he waits. He looks around to see if there's anybody that he thinks might be the guy, but he never finds anything out about this. Now, another summer would come along. In the summer, Seymour focused on trying to find out more about Mazie's medical history. Now, because Mazie often gave a fake name, they couldn't even find any dental records for her. He thought this could be possible, that her body had been located if she was dead, and they couldn't identify her because her dental records were not under her real name. And she had lived all around the country. She had lived in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Oklahoma. Now, Lily Goldberg was supposedly Mazie's best friend. She told Seymour that Mazie's ex-husband Kenneth had left West Virginia after the first time the police came out to talk to him. And he couldn't find Lily after this. He says that it was said that Lily owed back rent and she was trying to avoid the police, so she leaves. Kenneth Palmer reappeared again in around Christmas of 1981. It says he got drunk and drove his new wife and children to Mazie's mother's house. He crashed their Christmas party and told Mazie's mom that Mazie was shacked up with a new man in Kentucky. Now, he tells the family that he was living in Kentucky and that they lived just down the street from each other. Apparently, Kenneth didn't answer any of law enforcement's attempts to contact him. He had fled West Virginia and he owed a great deal of back debt. Mazie's mom urged him to go to the police with what he had told them, and he refused. Now, numerous skeletal remains were examined and ruled out all across the country. Seymour checked in a few times with Jay's birth mother in California to make sure that she had not heard from him. Now, about 3 years into the case, the family started to get more information. The families were finally told that the cases were connected. They were given a rough timeline of events of what happened that night. And this was the first time, 3 years after their son disappeared, this was the first time that the family had been told that Jay had been at the King's Inn that night. Jay's dad tried to talk to people who were there that night, but he couldn't track down anyone who remembered seeing them. Now keep in mind, this Bill Cottrell, his story has been kept private this whole time. They've never gone to the papers. No one in the families knew about this man having said that he spent time with them that night. So both families, once again, go to the media. They want to get this back out in the public. They want to tell, here's what we learned. After 3 years, we learned that Jay was last seen at the Knight's Inn. Now, police had been putting together a timeline of Mazie's life, and they said that she had a checkered past. Even though her friends remembered her fondly, they said she was not perfect. They began to tell about her habit of lying and using aliases. Now, this Lily Goldberg had reappeared at some point and went to the police and told them. Now, she said that she had known Mazie when they both lived in New Jersey. She said that she had even taken Mazie to a dentist's office there, but she couldn't remember the name of it. She did not hold back with the police. Seymour said she told everything that she could remember about Mazie, and she said Mazie had a dozen aliases. Talking more with Mazie's friends and family, they began to dig up more about her life. They said that she had numerous connections to biker gangs and drug dealers. Mazie was a woman with many secrets, and some of the people that she associated with were known criminals. Police talked with her sister Rena about some of her ex-boyfriends, and she said a lot of them were suspicious types. They were criminal types. She said that she had hung out with a guy who used to hang around this Roaring Twenties bar where Jay and Mazie had met that night. Now, Rena tells that Mazie and her friends would often get rides from this guy, but she couldn't remember his name. She said he was a white male and he had long, curly red hair. He drove a black van, and he had a motorcycle jacket with motorcycle patches all over it. And it's unclear if police ever were able to find this guy or find out who he was. Now, one of the more promising suspects was a man named William Gerald Hodge. Hodge was living with Mazie not long before she vanished, and he had a criminal record. He had charges for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, grand larceny, aiding and abetting. Friends of Hodges was another suspect named Brian Keith Hanna. He had a long criminal record. And at one point, it was said that he had lived with Mazie when she was living with Hodge, or the three of them had lived together. And Lily said that Hannah was especially dangerous and that at one point he tried to rape one of her friends. In early 1983, Seymour tried to locate William Hodge and Brian Hanna, but it was never made public if he was actually able to find them or to get any information from either of them. So this was just a very strange case of two people who just seemingly vanished into thin air on this night. But now a lead came in May of 1982 when Seymour received an anonymous letter claiming that Jay had actually gotten into an argument with Kevin Withrow. Now, Kevin was later interviewed about this, and he told the police that he had a bad memory. So he said he had been drinking a little bit that night, but he doesn't remember getting into any kind of argument with Jay. He does remember seeing him and speaking to him, but he says, if Jay had asked me for a ride home that night, I definitely would have given him one, even if we had have argued. When asked what he thought happened to Jay, Kevin told police that when Jay was with a girl, he became hot-headed and overprotective. So this leads me to think, and later on in this article, the writer of this article also agrees, is it possible that when they arrived at this other bar and she left the table and went upstairs, is it possible that when Jay went up to look for her, that he saw her there talking to another man and maybe got into an argument with someone? It's hard to believe that, but keep in mind, I started to say it's hard to believe that no one would have come forward and said, yeah, I was at the bar that night. I remember seeing this 6'4" tall young man get into an argument with another man over this woman. But this wasn't being broadcast the way it is today. If this had happened today, it would be all over social media, and back then there was no social media. And the father of this Jay had actually had to take out articles himself in the newspaper because, in his own words, police were not really doing much of anything to put the word out about these two being missing. So the real answers that either family would get would come later that year in 1984. 30 miles from Charleston, at the base of a strip mine, a security guard was doing his morning rounds on Cannleton Holler. It was May 10th at around 6:30 in the morning. He was doing his usual routine of checking everything before the coal trucks started running, and he said that he thought there might be something going on down in the road because coal trucks would normally have already had started running, and he hadn't seen any coal trucks come up the holler that morning so far. So he decided to walk down the road to make sure there were no rocks or debris or trees down or anything that might be obstructing the coal trucks from coming up. As he's walking along checking the roads to make sure everything was clear, he spotted a blue and pink plaid shirt laying in the woods. He thought that was very strange and odd that a shirt like that would be out here in the woods on this strip job in the holler. So he walks out to look at this shirt, and this is when he realizes that it's attached to a body. Now he calls police, and around 7 o'clock that morning, police come out and they begin to process the scene. Now, word got around in the community and people were talking, and so Goldie, who was Jay's stepmother, calls the police and says, is it true that a body was found? And they said, yes, there was a body found, but they didn't have any information at that time. But by 2 o'clock the next day, police showed up at the family's dentist's office, and they got Jay's dental records, and they informed the family that the dental records were a match to Jay. So, Jay Farley had been found at last. Now, in the media reports from the 1980s, police kept even the cause of death for Jay a secret. They said only that they were able to determine that he had probably died the same day that he disappeared because he was still wearing the same clothing. But now, in a strange turn of events, it was later revealed that he was wearing only a shirt and socks. He wasn't wearing any underwear, he wasn't wearing any shoes, and he wasn't wearing his pants. So I don't know if these items were taken by the killer. I don't know if this was some type of an assault on this young man. His hands had been bound behind his back with tape. The tape was frayed, but it was still there. More details were released later, and it was said that Jay had a bullet hole in his shirt, and the bullet itself was found laying on the ground underneath his rib cage. So he had been shot. I don't know if it said he was laying face down or face up. It didn't say, but it just said that he had been shot, probably through the heart. His family was able to identify him, and also a ring that was found on his hand that they said was his ring. Probably his school class ring that he had just graduated from high school. Police scoured the area for his pants, shoes, and underwear, but they never found them. Now, a year and a half before Jay's body was found, there was another body found in the general area that was also nude from the waist down. The body was also male, and at the time of the police report was compiled on Jay, this other case was still open. And I searched and looked to see if I could find anything about that. I went all the way back to 1981, 82, and 83, and I could find nothing about a male body. And it doesn't say here, it just says in the same general area. So that was a strange coincidence. But I couldn't find anything about that body having been found. Police continued to look for Mazie, and they searched that entire area, thinking that if he had been killed and disposed there, she probably was too. But they were never able to find any trace of Mazie. Now, Jay's dad and ex-wife Goldie were interviewed, and they said police had botched the investigation so badly that they had absolutely no faith that this case would ever be solved. They said that they had completely lost their trust in law enforcement, and John said that every police officer he had spoken to either brushed him off or outright laughed at him, except for Seymour. He was the only one that he had put in any effort to work this case and stay in contact with the family. And his ex-wife Goldie said that while they were heartbroken, they hoped that the discovery would give the family some closure. But they never found out who killed Jay. To this day, they still don't know who killed him. And the police report from 1984 has Mazie listed as a suspect in Jay's disappearance. But this seems to be a formality, as she has never been found and she is still considered a missing person. She could still be alive out there somewhere, or she may have been a murder victim as well, and they just never were able to find her remains. So, it says that while she had this checkered past and this life of, lying to people, lying to her friends, using aliases to get out of paying dental bills and hospital bills, and lying to just, it's kind of like she was a con artist, but she came across to everybody as just this really trusting, overly trusting person. And they believed that she had gotten mixed up with some of these people who were criminals, these biker gangs, and that she was just trusting of these people and didn't see a threat. So in 2020, Jay's family, along with the Charleston Daily Mail, teamed up to compile all known information. They are urging anyone and everyone interested in true crime to read over these files, and they're reopening these, and people are out there sharing this, and like myself and others on the internet are sharing this story to try to breathe more, to bring it back into the forefront. So someone out there may remember that night. This Bill Cottrell man, I don't know if he's still living or not. Don't know how deeply he was interviewed. Mazie and her ex-husband had divorced only 3 months prior. Was he investigated? Was it possible that he'd come into town that night? Was he still living in this town at that time? But this article, this person that writes this article says, I keep coming back to Bill Cottrell, the man who says he gave Mazie and Jay a ride. I'm not suggesting that he was involved. I don't know enough about him, but there seems to be some missing pieces to his story. And Cottrell came forward and told police, I gave these two people a ride that night. And they both disappeared into the night, into this bar, and I guess he got tired of waiting on them, so he left. Bill Cottrell says he did not know either of them prior to picking them up that night. So maybe they were hoping to get a ride home. Maybe she thought there would be someone in there that she would know, and maybe that's what did happen. Maybe he said, we both need a ride home, and when they left the bar with this person, something else took place. And only this one man's story, gives that account. Jay's father died in 1990s and never learned who was responsible for his son's murder. Both Mazie's parents have both died since. And as each member of the families die off and the story grows colder and colder, it seems like just these people coming forward to reopen this cold case and to bring it back out into the public's attention, hoping that maybe someone out there will remember something. The whole aspect of him being stripped of his clothing from the waist down, was this a humiliation tactic maybe by the person that killed him? Or did they just like his shoes and jeans and think they would take them and keep them for themselves? The Charlie Project has Mazie. She was born, she went missing July 14th, 1979 from Charleston, West Virginia. She would be 71 years old today. She was last known to be wearing a pink and orange blouse, blue Lee jeans, sandals with dangly earrings, and possibly wearing a gold ring set with a small diamond. She was carrying a small blue purse with silver trim. She's described as a white female with brown hair and brown hazel green eyes. He was fresh out of high school. He hadn't started his life in the world yet, still living at home with his grandmother, sharing a bedroom with his younger brother. He was naive to the world and got mixed up with this older woman who was known to not be the most forthright person, and maybe he was just too trusting. And now, while Mazie Mae had no known prior criminal records, police don't really believe that she was responsible for Farley's murder. However, they do believe that her association with someone possibly led to his murder, as she had been known to associate with people who had criminal backgrounds. And so as of today, she's still considered a missing person, and they have no leads that are known to the public about the murder of Jay, who could have been involved in that. If anyone has any information, they're urged to contact the Kanawha County Sheriff's Office at 304-357-0200. Thanks for watching.